I'd like you for a moment to think about a wild Mustang thundering across the plain, majestic and free. And I'd like you to think about some of our last tangled tracts of wild land and how precious they are. Think about a wild predator like a wolf or a hawk and how awe-inspiring they are in their power. And now think of a wild human. What happens when you bring the words wild and human together? I'm going to guess that the image that came up for you was not quite as flattering. Maybe a tangled-haired savage, or maybe a particularly memorable moment in spring break. If you were to go to the dictionary and look up wild, I would guarantee that the first definition that comes up is being in a natural state. But then very quickly, words like out of control, barbarous, vicious, savage will appear. I'd like to understand how we fall so precipitously from being in a natural state to barbarous, and why that seems particularly true for us humans. Well, I'm going to blame Thomas Hobbes. Through this talk, I'm going to blame lots of dead people because they can't defend themselves. And he's one of the many that put forward his philosophy of natural humanness as being one of brutal self-interest. In fact, I think he used the terms brutish, nasty, and short. And though I'm quite sure he wasn't thinking about spring break, sometimes it feels like it might fit. But what I'd like us to do and think about is reclaiming the notion of wild, especially for we humans. Wild, being in a natural state, is being in the right place, doing the right thing that fits us best. It's about being optimal. It's about being in a place of thriving. And I like to think of it as being firing on all cylinders. And why I think that's important today is because we are facing lots of challenges in the world, and we need to be firing on all cylinders to pull ourselves out of that efficiently and effectively. Another thing that I'd like to see us do is to own our genius. We tend to have a who-me kind of attitude about genius. It might be you or you're a genius because you're the smart one or you're the talented one, but I don't think of genius that way. I think of genius as a state that we can all access and do access. We can move into it and it can move through us. But that's not going to happen if our lives tend to be monotone, free of stimulus, boring. And I think they kind of are today. And again, I'm going to blame some dead white guys. So Rene Descartes and others like him have well established the Cartesian way of looking at the world. We apply that to our physical world. We apply that to us humans. We apply that to our social worlds. What that has done for us is done two things. It has created a reliance on our reason and put it in dominion over our other ways of knowing. And it's created a cause and effect, very linear way of looking at the world. And so we have abandoned our systems thinking capability, our ability to understand the rich, complex systems that we live in and with. Frankly, I think that's insane. And I love this definition of insanity that comes from the Okanagan tribe's word that has 4 parts for insanity. I'll read them. Talking inside your head. That's kind of the hyper rational piece. Scattered and having no community. Disconnected with the land, and cut off from your whole earth part. So let's get sane, okay? Let's get sane. Let's open ourselves to this richer stimulus and therefore access our genius in a way that we can't today. So one of the things that I think we need to do is we need to go deeper. So if we're in a hyper-rational mode, we have abandoned largely our other ways of knowing. We have other ways of perceiving and understanding the world. We have a kinesthetic, physical-based, sensing-based of understanding intelligence. We have a feeling, emotional-based way of knowing. And we have an intuitive gut way of knowing. It doesn't mean that our rational minds aren't important. It means that we're out of balance. So I would invite all of us to get deeper and tap into these multiple ways of knowing. I'm sure we all have our own stories that we can relate about when our feelings or our intuition really rose up and helped us. So that's going deeper, and I'd like to see us go broader as well. I'd like us to get beyond what seems like, frankly, a juvenile attachment to our individual selves and get back in touch with the systems in which we belong and we live and we breathe. Our families, our tribe, our organizations, our communities, and our natural world. Get in touch with that interdependency. And when we do that, two amazing things happen. One is we understand in the interdependency of our systems that we are not only dependent, but we are responsible for their well-being and their health. And in that visceral feeling of responsibility comes a commitment to act for the best of all. And as we're going deeper and we're going broader, we have available to us this much richer stimulus that creates the opportunity for innovation and creativity like never before, emerging out of this stew. And when we put those two things together, we're able to unleash innovation for the purpose of social good. We're here to talk about how ideas can move to action. So what I'd like to do is leave you with some concepts and then some starter actions that you might take out of this door and play with yourself. So first, who has heard of the smartest person in the room syndrome? So we have a tendency to walk into a room and feel pretty proud of ourselves, our intelligence. We're smart. We have our point of view pretty formulated, and we can't wait to get it in there. If people aren't listening to us, if there's dissent, we're impatient with that, and we are really attracted to agreement. Well, if you'd all turn to your right, you can introduce yourself to the other smartest person in the world, in the room, rather. If we're all the smartest people, we're not listening to each other. So I would invite all of us to quiet that cleverness and be open and listen well. Here are some things that you might try to do that. First, pause, rinse, and repeat. When you catch yourself in that mode, take a deep breath, pause, try to back away, try to rinse your mind of that answer that you can't wait to get in there, and play with that and try it again and again. Repeat. Get into that practice. Follow the 5 whys. Be a toddler. I guarantee that if you get curious and ask why 5 times, why is that? Now tell me why is that? Tell me why is that? It might become annoying, but I guarantee you will get into a place that you didn't expect to. And add a brick. So rather than waiting for your moment of inserting your opinion, your answer, think about how you might listen well and play with adding a brick to something that somebody else has said. And if you do it, somebody else will do it. And I think you'll be amazed at what you can build together. Your brain isn't the only thing that knows. I've already spoke about this in terms of multiple intelligence. So let's just go to the things that you might play with. First, pay attention to feelings and images. When you're called on to handle a challenge or a problem, rather than responding with your right answer right off, think about the images and feelings that arise for you and be brave enough to share those. It might take the conversation in a completely different and interesting way. Draw. When's the last time you have drawn a picture? Hopefully this is not a room full of artists. So when you're faced with an assignment or a challenge, maybe at work, take a moment, ask yourself a question, and rather than engaging that rational mind, draw a picture. You will incite a different part of your intelligence in your brain, and you will quiet that rational mind, and you'll be surprised at what comes out. And then lastly, take a walk. So engage that kinesthetic way of knowing. Put the problem in the back of your mind, take a walk for 20 minutes, and see what comes up. That's how I solve my biggest problems. Chaos isn't something to squelch. Now, I've already established we're all the smartest people in the room, and as that, we really like the rules, we like the processes, and we like the answers that we've already provided. So we have little tolerance and patience for those moments of chaos, those rule breakers that pop up. But I would challenge you to pay attention to those and think about, why are the rules being broken? And what can I learn from that? If we are like this herd of buffalo and we just pay attention to the rear end of the beast in front of us and follow along, we don't lift our head up and take a look for new stimulus and new information, it's called opening the learning loop, then it could be quite disastrous. Gruesome picture, I know, but it gets the point across. So, disastrous, entropy, you don't want that. So what can we do? First, you can turn off the screen. Enough said. You can get a life. So I don't know about you, but I live in a business world that pretty much frowns on vacation and hobbies and anything but being available 24/7. But that doesn't make us particularly productive or interesting. So go on vacation, turn it off, get a hobby, meet new people, have social events. Have patience with the rule breakers. Teach yourself to pay attention to the where and the whys of the breaking of the rules, and challenge yourself to think about, where is the wisdom in that? What can they teach you? And then lastly, invite in stakeholders. So you have a problem, challenge that requires a solution. There are always multiple stakeholders that are affected by that. And generally we have our go-to folks that we touch in with, or we pay attention to. Consider who else you'd bring into the mix to talk to learn from, to engage in their wisdom. And lastly, you don't need to come up with the answer. You don't need to work to find the answer. I think we often think of our challenges as math problems, and if I can just think harder about it, something will come up. I think that's probably the worst path to go down. The way I think about it is holding an empty container. And if I hold an empty container and I just fill it with things that are interesting, learn new things, get new stimulus, put it all in there, something inevitably emerges. That might sound really fluffy, but frankly, that's how I do my job when I come up what I need to perform in terms of developing strategies for clients around their business. And that's what works for me. So what might you do? Take a moment of silence. Tom talked about this. The beginning of your day, the beginning of your meeting, before you charge into an issue. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. It doesn't matter how long. Clear that vessel. Quiet that rational mind. That makes room for other things to move in. Ask nature a question. So go for that walk. Hold a question in your mind, and you'll be amazed at what comes back to you. Could be in the form of metaphor, what have you. And then last, reinvent brainstorming. I love the idea of collective intelligence and wisdom. I love the idea of getting people together to think. But if a group gets together with the same bad habits that we've just discussed, then you're not going to get anywhere. So you can take any one of these starter tips, tools, tricks, and you can apply it to a group setting. Take a walk, ask nature a question, moment of silence, etc., and get much more out of brainstorms. And there's all sorts of other resources. Happy to talk to anybody offline about that. So try those on, take those home, see how they feel. And again, I would invite you to begin to think about moving from being the smartest person in the room, to being one of the many wild geniuses in the room, and see what we can do together. Thank you.